Sparta, Lycurgus is said to have resumed the whole of the land for the state, and redivided it equally among the citizens. We also have traces of laws existing in other states to regulate, in the interests of equality, the possession and transfer of land. But it does not appear that any attempt was made in any state permanently to control, by public authority, the production and distribution of wealth. Meantime, however, the problem of social inequality was exercising the minds of political theorists, and we have notice of various schemes for an ideal polity framed upon communistic principles. Of these, the most important, and the only one preserved to us, is the celebrated Republic of Plato. And never, it may be safely asserted, was a plan of society framed so consistent, harmonious, and beautiful in itself, or so indifferent to the actual capacities of mankind. Following out what we have already indicated as the natural drift of Greek ideas, the philosopher separates off on the one hand the productive class, who are to have no political rights, and on the other the class of soldiers and governors. It is the latter alone with whom he seriously concerns himself, and the scheme he draws up for them is uncompromisingly communistic. After being purged by an elaborate education of all the egoistic passions, they are to live together, having all things in common, devoted heart and soul to the public good, and guiltless even of a desire for any private possession or advantage of their own. In the first place, no one, says Plato, should possess any private property, if it can possibly be avoided. Secondly, no one should have a dwelling or storehouse into which all who please may not enter. Whatever necessaries are required by temperate and courageous men who are trained to war, they should receive by regular appointment from their fellow citizens, as wages for their services, and the amount should be such as to leave neither a surplus on the year's consumption nor a deficit, and they should attend common messes and live together as men do in a camp. As for gold and silver, we must tell them that they are in perpetual possession of a divine species of the precious metals placed in their souls by the gods themselves, and therefore have no need of the earthly one; that in fact it would be profanation to pollute their spiritual riches by mixing them with the possession of mortal gold, because the world's coinage has been the cause of countless impieties, whereas theirs is undefiled. Therefore to them, as distinguished from the rest of the people, it is forbidden to handle or touch gold and silver, or enter under the same roof with them, or to wear them in their dresses, or to drink out of the precious metals. If they follow these rules, they will be safe themselves and the saviours of the city. But whenever they come to possess lands and houses and money of their own, they will be householders and cultivators instead of guardians, and will become hostile masters of their fellow citizens rather than their allies. And so they will spend their whole lives hating and hated, plotting and plotted against, standing in more frequent and intense alarm of their enemies at home than of their enemies abroad, by which time they and the rest of the city will be running on the very brink of ruin. The passage is interesting, if only as an illustration of the way in which Plato had been impressed by the evil results of the institution of private property. But as a contribution to political theory, it was open to severe attack from the representatives of experience and common sense. Of these, the chief was Aristotle, whose criticism has been preserved to us, and who, while admitting that Plato's scheme has a plausible appearance of philanthropy, maintains that it is inapplicable to the facts of human nature. To this conclusion, indeed, even Plato himself was driven in the end. For in his later work, The Laws, although he still asserts that community of goods would be the ideal institution, he reluctantly abandons it as a basis for a possible state. On the other hand, he endeavours by the most stringent regulations to prevent the growth of inequalities of wealth. He distributes the land in equal lots among his citizens, prohibiting either purchase or subdivision, limits the possession of money to the amount required for daily exchange, and forbids lending on interest. The object of a legislator, he declares, is to make not a great but a happy city. But only the good are happy, and goodness and wealth are incompatible. The legislator, therefore, will not allow his citizens to be wealthy, any more than he will allow them to be poor. He will seek to establish by law the happy mean, and to this end, if he despair of the possibility of a thorough-going communism, will legislate at least as indicated above. The uncompromising idealism of Plato's scheme, with its assumption of the indefinite plasticity of human nature, is of course peculiar to himself, not typical of Greek ideas. But it is noticeable that Aristotle, who is a far better representative of the average Greek mind, exhibits the same mistrust of the accumulation of private property. In the beginning of his Politics, he distinguishes two kinds of money making: one natural, that which is pursued for the sake of a livelihood; the other unnatural, that which is pursued for the sake of accumulation. The motive of this latter, he says, is a desire for life instead of for good life. And its most hateful method is that of usury, the unnatural breeding of money out of money. And though he rejects as impracticable the compulsory communism of Plato's Republic, yet he urges as the ideal solution that property, while owned by individuals, should be held as in trust for the common good, and puts before the legislator the problem so to dispose the higher natures that they are unwilling, and the lower that they are unable, to aggrandise themselves. Such views as these, it may be noted, interesting though they be, as illustrating how keenly the thinkers of ancient Greece had realised the drawbacks of private property, have but the slightest bearing on the conditions of our own time. the complexity and extent of modern industry have given rise to quite new problems.